Okay.
Okay, so it's recording now, so I'll just check once in a while to make sure it's
The
recording.
camera actually records, huh?
Yeah, it's my brother's.
So go ahead
It's
and
pretty good. Okay. So what point at the war were you like? What did you enter the war?
What?
At what point did you enter the war? Like, what was going on in the war?
You mean my personal experience?
Yeah.
Well, I had just gotten my commission as a second lieutenant and a first officer at the 1st of November of 1941. And my first assignment was as a flight instructor at Moffett Field in California. And I was officer of the guard on Pearl Harbor Day when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. And I remember that day because as officer of the guard, when they got word that the Japanese had attacked, Moffett Field had a big dirigible hangar on the field, which was 11 football fields long and 210 feet high. And they took I and a corporal and ran us up to the top of that big, it looked like a big loaf of bread, and put us on top of that to watch for Japanese airplanes. And we had to sit up there until it got dark. And then they finally, it took 11 minutes by elevator to get up to the top, and another 11 minutes to get back down again. So that was my first experience with the war. And then for a year and a half, I was a flight instructor with basic flying school. And that lasted for a year and a half, and then I went into bomber training as a bomber pilot, and was assigned to the 489th Bomb Group, and went through training with the 489th, and then we got sent over to England, and of course that's where this book picks up. It describes our trip, how we flew over there, and the combat missions we flew, and then when we got sent back again to retrain into B-29s. And that was pretty much my total experience in World War II, because while we were in B-29 training, getting ready to fly over to Okinawa for the the invasion of Japan, that's when the Japanese surrendered, and of course that was the end of World War II. So my World War II experience was first year and a half as a flight instructor, and then as a bomber pilot.
Were you a pilot before you went to war?
Oh yes, yeah. I had started flying while I was in college, and then I enlisted in the Air Cadet program with the Army Air Corps at that time, and I started my training as a pilot in March of 1941.
How old were you?
And that lasted for, well, about 7.5 months.
Oh.
And then I got my commission, as I said, on the 1st of November of 1941, and was assigned as a instructor pilot at Moffett Field, and started my career as a flight instructor.
Were you going out like every day? in doing missions, or how often were they?
Well, yeah, as a flight instructor, we were assigned 4 students, and we had to fly them an hour each every day. So we are, as a flight instructor, our assignment was to fly students for the 4 hours. And if you were in the morning flight, you flew the 4 hours in the morning. Or if you happened to be in the afternoon flight, and you would fly your 4 hours in the afternoon. But and then you had other duties on the base, other than just as a flight instructor.
What were your other duties?
But as I say, for example, that one day I was officer of the guard for that particular day, and other than that, you might have some assignment just around the base, and you often had a chance to for physical training and that sort of stuff too,
Yeah.
in the afternoon. And of course, once we got into bomber flight training, then you were assigned a crew, and you had to fly practice bombing missions and formation and all that stuff, training in bombers. And that lasted for several months before our group was formed, and we ended up flying over to England. Actually, we were flying out of a air base in Utah, and we flew down to Florida, and and then down to South America, and then across to Africa, and then from Africa up to England. And then, of course, all our missions flying out of Halesworth are in this book. And I was over there in England from, we got there in April, and then our group was transferred back in December of 1944. And that's when we converted to B-29s. And then we had finished our B-29 training in early August of 1945, and we're getting ready to fly over to Okinawa. And then, of course, the Japanese surrendered in, I think it was August of 45.
Did you have any, did you witness any, like, planes going down, like, that were shot down?
I can't hear too well. So
did you witness any planes being shot down?
did I witness any?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. In fact, in the breakthrough at St. Lo, when they sent about 900 airplanes over to bomb ahead of Patton on the breakthrough out of the beachhead at Normandy, I saw, I think there was around 5 airplanes on fire at one time.
Wow.
Because we were down so low. We had to bomb it at 8,000 feet because of the weather. And and then of course flying lead airplane up in front, you normally didn't get a chance to observe any of the airplanes that were shot down behind you. You might see it in another bomb group up ahead of you or something like that. But you could tell when an airplane got hit with flak.
Did it make you nervous or anything? Did it make you nervous? Or were you still pretty confident?
No, I'd say probably the most nervous part of your whole day was when they woke you up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, to get dressed and eat breakfast and get down for your briefing and so forth. In other words, the preparation for the mission was really probably the most nervous part. But once you got in the airplane and had things to do to keep the airplane flying and so forth, you became so preoccupied with what you were trying to get done that you weren't, the nervousness kind of faded away. And then of course, if your airplane got shot up, then some of it returned again if you had problems trying to find your way back. In fact, that one, when I told you about that one mission that's in that book, when we got shot up over Paris and our gasoline lines were all cut and so forth, just getting that airplane back to England again, you know, kind of hectic. And of course, we had another mission when we were going in to bomb at Magdeburg, which is on the outskirts of Berlin, and we had an engine blow up. And it got spun out of the formation. We had to fly back out of Germany alone, all by ourselves. And that was a pretty nervous experience. And that's it. Mission is described in that book, where it's called My Longest Day. But usually, when you were in the airplane flying the mission, you were so preoccupied with the things you had to get done and do and keep track of that you really didn't have time to be nervous. The people that had the most problem on the missions was a co-pilot, because he didn't have any specific assignment. You know, he was there to back up and help the pilot, but he didn't have any guns or anything. And of course, like the navigators and the bombardier and the gunners, they all had something they were supposed to be doing, but he didn't. And the people that had the nervous breakdowns and that sort of thing, that were the co-pilots, probably the ones that had the toughest time on the missions. We had one interesting incident. You know, we wore oxygen masks at 22 to 25,000 feet, the altitude we flew at, and the temperature up there was 45 degrees below zero in the airplane. And of course, your oxygen mask, as you breathe and everything, the moisture would collect at the sides of the oxygen mask and then drain out. And we had one co-pilot that got so mesmerized with watching the flak and everything that was coming up, shooting at us. And he was leaning against the window of the cockpit. And water froze his oxygen mask to the window. And so until they got back down to lower altitude again where it would thaw out, he was had his head pinned against the window. He couldn't move his head. But
And Jess, can you describe the longest day for that story?
Could you describe your longest day from the book? Could you describe your longest day from the book?
The story.
The story?
you mean about the guy with the
The longest
Oh,
day?
the longest
yeah.
day.
Is that where you
Yeah.
avoided the smokestacks?
yeah, the longest day is in that book.
Can you describe that for Angela? Can you retell that story?
Yeah, we had we were flying group lead on that mission, and it was all the way into Berlin area. About halfway there, over the middle of Germany, Dümmer Lake area, we were flying into bomber stream, and we had noticed fighters had attacked the group right ahead of us. And our top turret gunner had just called out saying, hey, you know, there's fighters high at 1 o'clock. And about that time we heard this big bang and everything. And our number 2 engine started to run away. The prop started to wind up. And of course that pulled the airplane sideways. And then I was on autopilot since I was flying lead. And the airplane started to swerve. And then the autopilot tried to compensate, to straighten out the airplane again, and it hit the stops and reversed itself, and it spun us out of the formation. We were at 20-some thousand feet at the time. And when we finally got the airplane straightened out and recovered again, we were down at 15,000 feet. But we were completely separated from all the other airplanes and all by ourselves over the middle of Germany. So we turned around and tried to, first of all, we tried to feather that engine that had started to run away, and we couldn't get the engine to feather. And when you have a runaway prop on an airplane, the drag is so strong that you have all you can do to keep the airplane flying straight. So, and when we couldn't feather it, then we had to try to put enough power on the other 3 good engines that we had, and turn around and try to get straightened out to fly back to England again. And but we couldn't found out we couldn't hold altitude because of all the drag. So from 15,000 feet, we started to lose altitude, and we still had our bombs on board. So we tried to bomb the Midland Canal on the way out, and of course, we were down to about 12,000 feet when we tried to bomb. And we didn't hit anything with our bombs, but it lightened the load enough so that we could hold altitude a little better. And it took us about 2 hours to get out of Germany. And by the time we got to the Belgian coast, we were down to about 3,500 feet. And then we had to cross the North Sea and tried to hold altitude and hope our engines, the 3 good engines, would hold on, because if we'd lost another engine, of course, we wouldn't have been able to stay airborne. But we did make it back to England, and we got back with about, we were down to about 1,200 feet by the time we got to the English coast, and we were able to get to our air base and land the airplane. But that particular mission was 6 hours long. The first 3 hours were, fairly routine, and but those last 3 hours were just sheer hell. Try to keep that airplane flying and get out of Germany without any fighter protection or anything, because we were all by ourselves. But that particular mission is called My Longest Day, and there is described in detail.